So you match with somebody, right? You feel a spark. They're clearly interested. Then something happens, right? You start to pull away. You tell yourself that really it's not right, or there's something wrong with her. You know, you get busy, you disappear. That is avoidance, right? And that's what's killing your dating life and your relationships. So the things you need to change, right? You need to start to work on self-awareness. There's a podcast I listen to, and I've looked this up. Various studies show people always think they're more self-aware than they are. 80% of the population believe they're more self-aware than they are. Part of self-awareness is, and we practice this inside the group as well, and it's practiced in many of the men's groups I've been in, it's all well and good you knowing yourself, right? But that's only half of the equation. The other half of the equation is how people perceive you. Because true self-awareness is understanding yourself, your own patterns, blah, 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 all that stuff. Self-awareness, understanding your patterns, understanding why, all that kind of jazz, but also having a deep understanding of how people perceive you and receive you. And this is probably part of the self-awareness that people get really, really fucking wrong, is they only have half the thing. They're like, I know myself, I'm self-aware, I'm really kind, I'm really generous, I'm really loving. And then the people that meet them and interact with them, like, this guy or this woman is a fucking idiot. They're difficult to be around. They're unreasonable. They're selfish, blah, blah, blah. But they never hear this information. If they do hear this information, they're like, these people don't know me. But that's actually really counterintuitive to success, not just in relationship, but in business and in life and career, right? So self-awareness is about knowing self, but also having an understanding of how people perceive you. And this can be daunting because it can feel like judgment. But this is where you spend time with people that you trust, that you've opened up to, who have your best interests at heart, and you can feel that and know that, and you get feedback from those people, right? This is where coaching is so powerful as like a one-to-one thing and even in group, because you spend this time with somebody, like someone I'm coaching, they spend time with me, I listen to them, I talk to them, and then I give them feedback. I reflect like, hey, do you see how you're being around this thing? And they're like, holy shit, you're right. I've never known this. And I'm like, yeah, because no one's ever been willing to tell you, because everyone in your life doesn't want to upset you. And I don't worry about upsetting you because I'm here to help you. I'm here to help you move forward, right? And this is one, and then this is a little slight tangent I'm going to take you on. This is where the rise of ChatGPT and ChatGPT therapy, and even ChatGPT like life advice is really dangerous, because ChatGPT is built to, I'm going to say this crudely, to suck your dick. It's built to validate you and tell you how great you are and how amazingly clever you are. And if there's anything I know annoys me the most about ChatGPT, is the way that when you give it an idea, they're like, oh my God, you're so smart. Amazing for coming up with this. And you're like, motherfucker, I'm just another dumb guy. Can't you give me, like, challenge me more? But it doesn't. It doesn't challenge you enough, right? Unless you implore it to. And I think the problem is with ChatGPT as a tool for coaching and therapy is that it just wants you to, it wants you to feel that you're great. And there's a place for that, right? But ChatGPT is 90% that way. So my rant's over. Back to self-awareness. You've got to understand, you've got to catch yourself. Part of self-awareness, I think, is seeing the patterns. I don't think part of self-awareness is actually necessarily changing them. I guess it is if if you see it's harmful, how self-aware are you to keep doing something that's harmful to yourself and others? And that's a really good point. If you keep doing something that's harmful to you, what you desire to have, relationship, healthy, and you don't do anything about it, how self-aware really are you? Yeah? The next area you need to work on. Really is around communication. Communication. This is so important because relationships, I reckon, are about 80% communication. Actually, relationships, especially when you've been in for a while, is about 70% logistics. Where do you need to be? Where do I need to be? What am I doing? What are you doing? What are we doing together? And then when you have a child, it's like 99% logistics. Like, that's the truth. And if you can't express yourself and you can't communicate, right, quote unquote, you're fucked, right? Relationships will always be hard, but you can learn. This is the thing about communicating. You can really learn. Like, I was not a fantastic communicator. And I am so much better now with clarity, asking for what I need and want, saying what's on my mind, saying the uncomfortable thing. Because a lot of communication that destroys this the uncomfortable conversation, the conversation that you think is too difficult to have, right, with your partner, that you leave and avoid, and then you realize towards the end of the relationship, when you have the conversation, she's totally fine with it, and you've been worrying about it for the last 15 years or whatever it is, right? This is the kind of healthy feminine. The healthy feminine expresses, right? And then you can also argue the kind of healthy masculine, right, is able to discern as well, like, and deliver information in a way that's clear. There's a clarity in it in communication. There's the expressive part, which is like coming forward. There's the courage part as well, which is, you know, the masculine being courageous. And then there's the more of the expression. And then there's also, you know, the kind of containment of the clarity that we bring as well, this kind of masculine element. So this is like, there's so much elements to this when it comes down to it in communicating. And also delivering information with wisdom as well, right? Communicating. The next part is the emotional aspect, right? It's emotional aspect that you need to shift and change in yourself, right? This emotional capacity, which is usually very small, you need to increase the capacity. So some of this is about healing. You've got to go back to some of these old wounds, you know, and you might find that really uncomfortable, and it actually isn't as bad as you think. You know, you've got to go back, and some of this can be inner child work, inner critic work. This can be meditations and breath works, and some of it's somatic. A lot of it is somatic. These practices, going back to these feelings and these times in life and looking at them from a different perspective, because a lot of the time, the story we have about emotions and feelings is not really the truth. Give me an example. When I look back at my past, I have this instance of my dad shouting at me when I was reading to him when I was like 5. And for years, I felt quite angry about this. And I was working with a therapist, and he said to me, what else could have happened? And I remember being like, motherfucker, that's what happened. But he was like, what else could have happened? And I said, you know, maybe I think he was angrier than he was because of how I saw him later on. And he's like, so it's possible that maybe he wasn't that angry at that time, but through the years, the way you viewed it is that he's really angry. Yeah. And this is kind of one of the kind of core wounds I experienced of like not being good enough. Right. Or, you know, there are times when I tried to express what I needed and wanted and felt very shut down. Right. And that taught me my emotions, feelings, and needs aren't important. Right. So sometimes we have to look back at these old events, and we don't have to just look at them. We don't just talk about them like I've talked about here. This was like taking people back in a particular way and shifting that. So some of that is that emotional work. And some of the emotional work is learning to be with emotion. Like one of the emotional things, I wish one of the workshops I like to run is I like to get like 5 men, 5 women. And then I'd like the women to all cry and the men just to sit in front of them, like grounded, open, welcoming of the tears. Because that will change the men's lives, and it change the women's lives as well. If the man can just sit there and be with it, they've changed both their lives. And I've seen this happen in workshops where the tears are of joy, of love, and the man just sits there and he doesn't project onto like he's done something wrong. He just sits with like, this is an expression. It's totally okay. And I'm open to it. I'm a yes to it. This kind of sacred masculine idea of being a yes to life. And that would be life-changing for you, right? Because what I've seen in our couples work and also men individually, being able to be with our partner's emotions and sit with them gives us the capacity to be with our own. And this is something we practice inside the program, inside of breaking the chains of avoidance, teaching them how to be with emotion, because it literally shifts relationships drastically because you become less reactive, right? And you've talked about reactivity being an internal thing and also an external thing. And it shifts you out of reactivity, which is like a trigger. I've been triggered by her tears. I've done something wrong. I'm a fuck up in some way. I want to hide and retreat, which means your emotions have taken over you, experience, versus this grounded man who's like, she's crying. I feel like I've done something wrong, but there's a higher self I'm going to contact here and know that that's just a wound I have, and I'm going to stay present to her and her experience. And that's a whole different ball game to operate at as a man. And when you operate from that level of that kind of really healthy masculine groundedness, women feel it. Women are like gravitate and magnetized by it. The next point is going to be about leadership. As I said, you know, a lot of men, avoidant men, they lack this leadership in love. They might be absolute fucking rock star leaders in their businesses and so forth, very directional, very high flying. Like I said, a lot of my clients fall under this kind of bracket of man. But in their relationship, they lack leadership. Too much second guessing, overwhelmed by emotions, I talked about before, so they don't make decisions and choices. They don't move things forward, or they can be slightly reactive in their leadership, right? Very sensitive to their partner saying they're doing something wrong, or they could do something different. Not knowing how to actually bring a playfulness as well in those moments, like playfulness, often something lacking in a lot of avoidant men in relationship. They lack this leadership, this masculine leadership, and you call feminine leadership, you know, if you want to, this more feeling leadership, more creative leadership, but more masculine leadership, which is about self-awareness, being aware of self, also aware of the people you're leading, that external awareness, like, oh, I'm leading my relationship with Orsa. She really loves foot rubs and swimming. I'm going to arrange a weekend for us. So what we're going to do is going to go to a spa. She's going to go to the swimming pool. I'm going to go to the gym. She loves to sleep in the afternoon, so I'm going to go for a run. Like you're creating, leading something that benefits both human beings and the relationship as well. This sort of leadership and moving forward, creating plans, dates, but being connected to what you desire and what she desires. So that might be like, you're dating. Oh, she says she really loves bingo. I don't know why I've said bingo. If you're in the United States, you won't even know what that is, and I'm not going to explain. It's usually something that old people do. My nan loves it, and she's 90. Bingo. So you're like, okay, I know this really cool, hip bingo place. Lovely cocktails and bar. Fantastic. I'm going to go there for the day. She's going to get them like, oh my God, bingo. I love bingo. You read my profile. Fucking leadership. Right? That's sexy. You've paid attention, awareness. You've listened. You've taken action. These are the things that women love, right? Because they feel safe. There's consistency. Right? You're paying attention to the small details. If this is something I'm excellent at, paying attention to small details. If you pay attention to small details, women will trust you more because you're more aware, you're more socially aware. Most men aren't. They barely pay attention to the small details in their own home or in their room or their clothes, right? So, leadership. Next one, capacity for intimacy. Now, this is a kind of, pleasure, right? If we're talking about sexual intimacy, pleasure. And then we can also talk about intimacy from a point of leadership as well, like creating the structure, the safety in a relationship for intimacy to thrive, right? And then there's also the aspect of emotional intimacy, right? Which is an emotional piece, which is that healthy feminine, right? But it also has the kind of boundaries and structure of the healthy masculine. So you can see that this is a real polarity piece in every man, right? Because there's having deeper conversations, there's opening up emotionally, there's sharing yourself, your story, your pain, whatever it may be, your joy, your dreams, your vision, and holding space for, both of you. And then there's also leading in pleasure, right? Leading in depth of experience, physical experience that you can bring. And a lot of men really struggle with this, right? So, we talked about intimacy. The next is the rejection, right? Because this is a really central piece to the avoidant man, right? Rejection, judgment, ultimately underneath those things is this feeling of not good enoughness, right? That's really what it is. I'm not good enough, so I'm going to be rejected. I'm not good enough, so people are going to judge me, right? So this kind of sensitivity to rejection, this is about resilience, right? This is a building up ourselves, our inner strength, our inner kind of inner strength, inner belief, inner confidence, so that we can tackle life and that we realize that other people's judgments don't mean anything. But also there's a mental fortitude, right? There's a mental aspect, there's a mental strength to this, which is really connected to the kind of judgment and being like, oh, other people's judgment of me doesn't mean anything about me, right? And I know that might kind of fly in the face of what I said about self-awareness, but like the projected judgments we think people are going to have about us, right? That's just in our projection. So there's a mental fortitude of like not going and giving energy and power to that constantly. Right. So there's a lot in there, right, that you can do. And I could keep on going, right? There's one aspect in there that I kind of didn't say. What I'm going to say now is like there's a worship of the feminine. So like an adoration, a worshipping of the feminine, both our inner feminine, our own feminine nature, feelings, emotions, so forth, and the feminine, our partner. So that'd be like loving the emotions and feelings, the wild expression, the creativity, you know, all the things that we may suppress, the diversity, the empathy, right? Is like adoring that in ourselves, so that we can amplify that, and adoring that in our partners as well, right? So that we're not trying to suppress, we're actually lifting up, encouraging, right? And I know you might hear that and go, if I encourage her to be more emotional, then it's just going to be really crazy and chaotic. But the reason why it feels crazy and chaotic is because your emotional capacity is really small, because you've been suppressing your feminine unconsciously and consciously all these years. Once yours grows, you just have more capacity for it. You know, it's like just, you know, you swapping out a small bucket that can only take like 2 drops of water into a 20-litre bucket. It's a different ball game you're playing at. Those two drops are like, oh, why not? I can take a couple of litres and I'm good, right? And there's also the growing in empathy. You know, this is an emotional piece, but empathy is a really important thing for avoidant men, both for themselves and for others. Being in space where you can generate that empathy is vital, really, really vital, right? Self-trust, another one. As you see, you know, just let things come sometimes. Self-trust. Avoidant men don't trust themselves, right? So common. A lot of people, insecure attachment is really linked to self-trust. Growing in your self-trust through trusting your decisions and choices, especially in a relational space, right, is allowing yourself to make mistakes, yeah? Allowing yourself to fail at these things, because through that is where you find success. So we've gone over a lot, right? So, and I guess what to say is, to start closing, wrapping up, is like, when you restore this kind of inner polarity and outer polarity, yeah, balance of the masculine and feminine, and that's not balance, harmony, you know, whatever that looks like, or range is a better term, being able to be really, you know, really like a rock when you're holding space for your partner and not reacting to your emotions, but also being able to then cry the day that your baby is born, yeah, or feel really passionate about something, a topic, or be able to really hold good boundaries in your life, or to be able to say, discern between what's right and wrong morally for you in your life, right? Or the right, not the right, but the appropriate action in any moment, and to be interdependent, right? Interdependence is the higher level of dependence. Independent, interdependent means that that's how you build great businesses and relationships. When you allow your partner and yourself to be dependent upon each other, interdependence, right, to some degree, and also interdependent on other people. That's how you create great relationships. And the way you have to actually start to trust people, that they'll be there, right? Because they do want to be there for you, and not projecting this lack of trust constantly, because that's one of the things we do as avoidant men. So to create this kind of success in dating and relationships, what's needed is this kind of healthy internal polarity, as I've talked about, and external polarity, right? That's what creates attraction. That's what creates a stable relationship that feels safe, right? That feels consistent, because you start to become someone who can be relied upon, who opens up, who doesn't shut down, who doesn't avoid talking about things, right? Leaving someone completely second guessing. You might be really clear, like, hey, I'm feeling something right now, but I don't want to talk about it right now. That is clear communication. You don't have to spill your guts every. You might have to be like, I'm just not ready to talk about this thing. I need a day. I need a couple of hours, right? Disappearing for a week or two isn't healthy, right? You know, a few hours up to 24 hours, depending on how important it is perfectly reasonable. And it's a clear communication. That's often what we lack when it comes to wanting space and wanting time as avoidance. We don't communicate. We don't say, hey, I just need a bit of time, because we're so afraid that they're going to say no, or they're going to reject it, or they're going to, you know, push our boundary, which they might do. But you also then get the opportunity to say, hey, I just need some time to think about this thing that you've just told me, because it's the first time I'm hearing it, for example. You've been thinking about this for weeks. So give me a few hours. and be clear. Masculine energy, clarity. I'm going to come back in 3 hours and I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to go for a walk in the forest and feel the energy of the forest and see what that tells me, and then come back and have this conversation. And we can do this from a place where we're both grounded and calm and relaxed. Yeah, and just know that I love you and I want to do what I can, whatever I can to make this relationship work. Create some reassurance. Yeah, and then the payoff ultimately of doing this integrated work is happy, healthy relationships, right? Fun dating lives that aren't full of like fear and worry and anxiety, right?